NHL Central Scouting's list is out, and we react to it, break down the top 15s for North America and Europe's skaters, and go through the surprises, too high, too low, all coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down NHL Central Scouting's list for the mid-season. They've come out with a long and extensive list for North American and European skaters. We'll go through the surprises in our third segment, but first and foremost, we'll break down the top 15 for both North America and Europe, talk about the players that are there, and where they show up in these rankings. All that's going to be coming up on today's show. But before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this, make sure to make us your first listen of the day and leave a review if you can. Now, to get things started here, we'll start on the North American side because there are some decent surprises in there. Obviously, at first overall, no debate, no discussion, no question. It's Macklin Celebrini, right?
Indeed it is. The least shocking player in all of these rankings is Macklin Celebrini at 1 for North America. Yep. I don't think it is close for anyone that has watched a lot of this draft class for these rankings. I have not personally seen a single public scout come out and say that they have anyone other than Celebrini at 1 since like maybe October. Yeah. So he's really entrenching himself in that top position. So I think we can move on rather swiftly here because the interesting parts of these rankings really come beyond that number 1 slot.
Yeah. And I was talking with some scouts, after the Central Scouting list come out, and we really fully agree on the fact that it's completely wide open after 1. Like it can go in any order, depending on what the team prefers, right? So speaking of which, at 2nd overall on the North American Scouting list, we find Artyom Levshunov, the big right-handed defenseman out of Michigan State in the NCAA. He's a weird player. He takes some getting used to, and once you do, you still find some warts. But I get it. I understand. He's really, really toolsy. He's massive. He's rangy. He's got a fantastic shot. Can move the puck really well. The main concern for me is the decision-making. And I'll give a caveat to this. I'm not a big fan of this mold of defensemen. You look back at the players I'm lower on than consensus. They're all toolsy defensemen who can't really think the game at an advanced level. And these guys will make the NHL and will play top minutes, but they'll make you rip your hair out. Like, I don't like that. But like overall, I understand the hype with Levshunov. He's a player who up until like a year and a half ago was playing like U16 in Belarus, which is not a level where you're really forced to think too much. And now he's playing in Michigan State and kind of plying a trade. And, he was playing in the USHL last year, but like in a lesser known program. And, it's going to take some time before his thought process comes up to par. I think there's a chance he makes it, but overall it's rough. I have some defensemen that I like better in this North American group than him. But moving on to 3, we've got Caden Lindstrom. And I think we can both agree this is a really, really fun, really enjoyable player to watch, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been a pretty big fan of Lindstrom for the last couple months. I remember with a lot of other public scouts, I was a bit surprised when Elite Prospects had him at 4th overall or 5th overall in their October rankings.
Yeah.
But that got me to really take a closer look at him. And I think I scouted 4 consecutive games in depth on him in one day because I just couldn't get enough. He's really, really fun to watch. And as a scout, really satisfying to watch too. He's the type of player that fans would adore. He plays with a lot of physicality, but he's not a player whose physicality represents his game. It is one of his tools that he knows how to access, but he is so skilled. He's really intelligent. He's a high-end goal scorer, consistently gets to the middle, really getting to dangerous areas, quite a capable playmaker as well. He uses his range very effectively to adapt to complex offensive situations. And his defensive game has also steadily improved over the course of the season, playing top line center minutes with a pretty good team. So he'll be definitely a player that I could easily see going top 5 on draft day. I think a lot of teams will be very intrigued by his toolkit and his profile.
Yeah.
And I think he's more than deserved here at the number 3 slot.
For sure. And then at 4th overall, we have Zeev Buium. We've talked about him at length. An offensive left-handed defenseman who can really do a bit of everything, is extremely wriggly and tough to hit, tough to pin. He always finds a way out of pressure. He's really, really interesting and has an offensive toolkit that, especially with the looks I've got of him at the World Juniors, he showed that he can really step it up and play defensively as well. I was really, really impressed by him, and he might just be my favorite defenseman in this class. Then at 5th overall, we've got a bit of a surprise. We've got Trevor Conley at 5th overall. Ahead of some really interesting players. And Trevor Conley is really interesting. He's an extremely skilled player. He can move through pressure really well. Every time he gets a puck, he just accelerates the pace of play and creates something. There's a lot of questions surrounding him, and I'm really surprised to see him this high, but we'll talk about that later on. We've also got Carter Yakimchuk as another surprise at 6th overall. He's a right-handed defenseman, was putting up great numbers offensively with Calgary, but I have a lot of questions about, again, the decision-making, the thought process, but especially the defensive side with Yakimchuk has been hit or miss. So seeing him ahead of Sam Dickinson at 7th overall, that's shocking, right?
It's a take. It's not one I personally agree with. I'm still quite a big fan of Sam Dickinson, as I know that you are as well.
Yep.
But Carter Yakimchuk has been an experience to scout this season. I know that multiple of our scouts at Dauber have had varying experiences with that process. Yeah. I know that our WHL scout, Lou Sweeney, has not particularly enjoyed that part of the job so far this year because... Yeah. While Yakimchuk is really tools, he has a very, very good shot. There are many aspects of his game that are a lot more frustrating to watch than other players that we have ranked in the top 15 here among North Americans.
100%. And yeah, that's kind of the opposite for Sam Dickinson. He's just the most stable, reliable defenseman you'll watch, and you're never in doubt when he's on the defensive side of the puck. But then at 8th overall, we've got Cole Eiserman, who continues his free fall in these rankings, and it's understandable. We've talked about this at length. It's like he put all his skill tree points into shooting and positioning, and the rest of his game just kind of falters and doesn't really uplift his skill set like it should. He's been playing on the 3rd line recently with Team USA at the NTDP, so it's been rough to watch. Then we got Berkeley Catton at 9th overall. Berkeley Catton is another one of those kind of skillful, a bit undersized, but overall just so dynamic. He's a really great forward. He mainly plays on the wing, but he can play center and take faceoffs. He can do a bit of everything. He's not a player who's going to give you a net positive defensive impact, but overall a really good option if you're looking for pure offense and upside in your lineup. He's a great option there. At 10th overall, we've got Zane Parekh, an offensive right-handed defenseman, probably the best offensive defenseman in this draft. In terms of his overall offensive impact, there are still some questions about the defensive side, but I like his profile a lot more than Berkeley Catton, than Carter Yakimchuk's, because with Parekh, he's still an elite thinker of the game, whereas Yakimchuk has a lot of really interesting tools, but doesn't really think the game at that level. So I'm really surprised to see that discrepancy between them, with Yakimchuk at 6 and Parekh at 10. And then we got a trio of forwards here in Tij Iginla, Liam Greentree, and Adam Yeko. Tij Iginla, Jerome McGinley's son, really great scorer, really moves really well off the puck, but he's also added a lot of intricacy and defensive play to his game. I mean, not the defensive play, rather the transition play in his game has really improved. So yeah, he was a bit more of a kind of bottom 6 player in Seattle when he was playing in their deep lineup last year, but really stepped it up and played really well since being joined with who's he playing with? Andrew Crystal, that's who it is. Liam Greentree, big right winger, scores a lot of goals, really can move off the puck, and really intelligent in all 3 zones. I've grown a lot on his game.
New captain as well.
New captain as well in Oshawa. Yeah, that's
leadership.
Fantastic.
TM.
Absolutely, that's what teams look for. We've also got Adam Yeko. Speaking of big boys, he's 6'5", 200 pounds. Plays at center for Edmonton. I'm not really sold on his game overall, but obviously, you're a big center. You can win faceoffs. You can play defensively. You're getting drafted high. And then to end up the top 15, we've got 2 more forwards. We've got Tarek Parasak, a favorite of mine, smartest forward in this class outside of Macklin Celebrini for me. Like, just so intelligent. Yeah, I love him. And Beckett Seneca, who's playing in Oshawa as well. Really interesting profile for this guy. He works really well off the puck. He can he can move really well defensively, and he ties up a lot of sticks, which is really important when you're playing in the defensive zone. I have a bit more questions about the offensive side. I don't see as much intelligence and intricacy on the puck as other players that are ranked below him. But I still understand him being ranked here. He's a really dependable, really reliable player. A contender is going to love him. He's the type of player you can easily get up to NHL level and get in your lineup, and he'll do you some good bottom 6 minutes. But that's the top 15 for the Central Scouting rankings. We'll get into the European side of things, break down their top 15 for skaters. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at Gametime. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute for any event, whether that's sports, theater, comedy, or wherever requires tickets, Gametime has you covered. They're a great option in terms of getting last minute tickets because they can get you deals up until the last minute before the event, and sometimes an hour after the event starts. They still have tickets for great deals ready to be bought, and it's really easy. They send you a QR code, you scan that out at entry, and you're in the event. It's really that simple. And yeah, they're really good for anyone who has a really rotating schedule with, someone like me who could find himself with an afternoon free out of nowhere. Like tonight, I might just go on Gametime and buy a ticket to the Habs game. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how the financial situation of that is, but I'd be really interested to see Joshua Roy plays first NHL game. We're recording this on Saturday, so going to be some really interesting stuff. But overall, they've got great deals for you. My favorite is zone deals. Basically, you pick the section and Gametime picks a seat, and it gives you an average of about 18% of savings. And the Gametime guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. So if you find tickets in the same section and row for less than what Gametime has to offer, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase at checkout. Terms apply, but again, super simple. You just create an account, use the code, $20 off. So download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about the European top 15 for skaters. I'll get into that right away, and we'll start off with, the trio on top's already a surprise, right? I mean, we have Konsta Helenius at first, Anton Silayev at second, and Ivan Demidov at third. How do you feel about that order there?
Oh my God, yeah, it's a lot, but it's my time to shine now here with the Europeans. Konsta Helenius is a highly intelligent player, and while the point production wasn't the greatest at the World Junior Championship, he was one of Finland's top play drivers offensively, playing some really solid two-way minutes, and was in a top 6 role down the middle for the entire tournament, putting in some pretty good performances. So I thought that he shone decently brightly at that tournament, all things considered, despite the lack of production. And while I think that top of all European prospects is still a little bit much for me personally, I think that, yes, he has certainly established his level of intelligence, his maturity to play high-level hockey against Liga competition, especially as a slightly undersized player. Like, he's 5'11", 180. He's not particularly big. So he doesn't have the biggest advantage playing pro hockey from a physical standpoint. But he's been playing really, really well. I still have some question marks about just how high the upside is, just how good the tools actually are, how he'll be able to leverage those consistently at the NHL level while retaining that defensive solidity and maturity. But I'm a big fan of him. I think he's certainly a top 10 talent. And there's definitely a case to be made for him as a top European. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah,
Anton Silayev is another player I like a lot, but I still think this is a little bit rich because at number 3 you've got Ivan Demidov. But with Silayev at 2, you have if we're talking about rangy defensemen, far more so than even Artyom Levshunov. Silayev's probably the rangiest defenseman that we've seen come through the draft as a high-end player since. I mean, I think he's a far better prospect than Maverick Lamoureux was in his draft year. But in terms of range as a defenseman, we're talking that level. And he makes some mistakes at times. He's far from a perfect defenseman, and he's definitely still a work in progress. But the upside here is really, really high. The decision making has been consistently improving over the course of the season, which is making me a lot more comfortable with talking about Silayev in that top 10 range.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's fascinating. But Ivan Demidov, in my mind, is quite clearly the most enticing European prospect, and he's far from the safest. He's not the slam dunk to play the most NHL games of all the players on this European list, but he is the one that I think will have the biggest NHL impact. And being ranked third overall here in the Central Scouting list definitely shows a little bit of just like the risk that there might be to his game. Like he's extreme, like he plays a game of raw flair. He loves to show off in a very like hockey way of like he shows off in order to create. It's always, it has an intention behind it. He's not showing off for the sake of showing off, but he will find the most like beautiful solutions to complex problems, which is eye candy for hockey fans, of course, but he does make some mistakes with that. But with Demidov, you also have a defensive, perhaps not consistency, but engagement that you don't usually have in these high flair, high skill players, especially coming out of Russia in recent years. Like Matvei Michkov was the polar opposite of last year, of not trying at all defensively, but just didn't matter with how good he was offensively. And I think with Demidov, it's kind of similar, even though their like individual strengths are a bit different in the offensive zone, but it's quite a top three. I think it's a pretty solid top three here. I think I agree that these are 3 of the 4 or so best European prospects this season. But it completely opens up after that, right? Because we have a couple of players that I know that we are not quite as high on as NHL Central Scouting is here, in Adam Jiricek, who is out for the season with injury, which really sucks, and Emil Hemming, who's coming off a really quiet World Junior Championship tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those 2 are the clear kind of surprises of this top 5. Jiricek's really violent, really aggressive defensively, but he's still kind of hesitant and shy with the puck, which doesn't really bode well. Emil Hemming, he's really good when he gets the puck in a shooting position. He's really able to rifle it in the back of the net, and he's really good at what he does. But he can fade out of games massively, and that can play into things. And having Michael Brandzack-Nygaard behind those 2, I don't know, man. This player is really, really good. And I know he had a bit of a disappointing World Juniors where he didn't really show as much effort, but like it's Norway. He played like 4 games in 6 nights. Like it's not easy. But yeah, overall, I really, really like him. Great defensive player, great effort level. At the Swedish level, in the pro leagues and in the Allsvenskan, he's been good. Outside of that, we've got Aron Kiviharju at 7.
For sure.
Undersized defenseman, really moves the puck well, excellent on the breakout, fantastic passer. The rest of his game's kind of a bit hesitant, and he's out with injury until at least like late March. So it'll be a bit it'll be a bit tough to get some more viewings on him. Matvei Shuravin at 8 is a bit surprising. He's a bigger defenseman. He's a great puck mover, but I still have some questions about the rush defense. I still have some questions about the ability to kind of think his way out of problems rather than just skate his way out of them. So that's another issue there. Igor Chernyshov at 9, big winger, plays really good hockey, really mature hockey for his age. And he's been interesting. He's been way, way, way too good for the MHL in Russia's junior leagues, but way, way too unready. In fact, for the Russian pro leagues of the KHL and VHL. So he's a bit of in a weird position, and I get him kind of slipping down rankings here. At 10, we have our first actual Swede from Sweden, in Lucas Patterson, the center from Modo. I haven't watched any of them. Have you gotten any clips yet?
I have. I've watched like 2 or 3 games of his. He's quite interesting. He's rather well-rounded. He's putting up some really good production in Sweden, and I've quite liked the tape. He looks to me like a 2nd or 3rd round player, more so than a potential 1st rounder, which he's more listed as here. But he's quite versatile. He's a pretty decent shot. He's quite deceptive. He knows that he is a versatile player, and he uses that to his advantage to confuse defenses. And he definitely thinks the game at a higher level than most J20 players. So he's stood up positively in my viewing so far.
For sure. And then after that, we have Leo Salin Valenius at 11. I thought his D partner, Alphonse Frey, was a lot more impressive. Well, not his D partner, but they play on the same team. But overall, Salin Valenius is a lot more dependable, a lot more defensively responsible. And I'm starting to see some flashes of offensive upside in the viewings I got from him. So it's interesting. Dominic Bedinka at 12th overall out of Malmö in Sweden as well. 6'3", 183-pound, good defenseman. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's actually interesting. He plays a very reliable style of hockey, which has him
Yeah.
already playing 20 minutes a night in the SHL right now, the last couple of
Mhm.
games. So he's getting a lot more minutes at a high level than most of the players we're talking about on
Yeah.
this on the European side of things, apart from like Silayev and Hellenius. But he's quite reserved. He's not particularly a defenseman that's trying to create a ton offensively. He takes the back seat in the offensive zone, but he's learning those things as the season progresses, and he's opening up a bit more in terms of trying things in recent weeks, which has been nice to see.
Yeah.
But not the highest ceiling of players, but he's playing consistent, solid, reliable minutes in the SHL as a draft eligible defenseman, which is
Yeah.
always a decent sign. So he's a player I want to get a closer eye on as the year progresses for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that molded player, Leon Mugli at 13th overall, playing in Zug in the Swiss National League, 6 foot, 165 pounds. Another really dependable, really reliable defenseman that makes good defensive plays. But again, another player's kind of tentative with the puck and doesn't really seem to know when and how to activate yet. I'm surprised to see him this high. I liked his fellow countryman Daniil Ostinkov a lot more at the World Juniors. And yeah, that's my kind of breakdown on Leon Mugli. We've got Nikita Artyomov at 14. This is really low for my liking.
Yeah.
I think he's in that kind of Silayev group in terms of the Russian players. Like he's really, really good. And finally, to end things off with the top 15, we've got Jesse Polkinen at 15, 6'6", 203 pounds, an overager. He's been fantastic in Liga. I watched a game of his recently against Pori, which you recommended me.
I told you
Oh my
he was
goodness.
good.
This kid is ridiculous.
It's funny.
And like, yeah, I don't care that he's 19. You have to pick him. Like, I think he's a first rounder at this point. But
Okay. My mission is starting to succeed here.
Probably late first, but yeah.
Because this is a player who is playing the same style of hockey he was playing at the World Juniors with the same level of confidence he's playing against men in Liga right now and playing similar minutes too. Like he's very, very good at hockey.
Absolutely. But that breaks down the top 15 of European skaters on Central Scouting's list. Now we're going to be going into the surprises, the guys that are too high, too low. We'll talk about some players outside of the top 15s right after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
The NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, that you can use on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. Whether you want to bet on your favorite team to win the Super Bowl or your favorite quarterback to throw for a couple of TDs in the next game, the choice is yours. I personally really enjoy using FanDuel for same game parlays to make the games that I actually attend all the more exciting. But you really have all the choice in the world with it. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so ending things off with our surprises from these rankings. We'll talk about players outside of the top 15, but also inside of the top 15 that are either too high, too low, that kind of surprise us with their rankings. I think we get started on the North American side here. I think the big surprise here, first and foremost, is Carter Yakimchuk at 6th overall. Again, I don't like this mold of player. It's just, I know it's kind of a personal thing, but also just watching them in the NHL, watching their numbers, their analytics, their underlying data in the NHL, it never really works out as well as people think it will. Carter Yakimchuk, again, just a fantastic toolsy defenseman. Like, just the tools on him are fantastic. He's big. He's got great skating. His stick handling's really good. He's got a bomb from the point. You can't just be all tools, no toolkit. Like, you need to put these things together and know when to use what tool at what time. And I don't feel like Yakimchuk has that covered at all yet. So I'm really surprised to see him this high in these rankings, especially if you look at the guys below him. Sam Dickinson, Zane Parekh, those guys are amazing, like really, really good at hockey, and are probably, like, especially Dickinson and Parekh are probably the two, top defensemen in this class, along with Steve Bouillon. So it's just, I don't get this. But Adam Yeko at 13, I'd say is even higher than I'm, than I'm comfortable with for Yakimchuk. So it's just, I get it. He's big. Yeah, he's big. He wins faceoffs. He's good defensively, but like, I don't know how much you can value a player that doesn't bring the level of offensive play that other players below him bring. Like you look at the names below him, there are players who could score like 60 points in the NHL.
Like Luke Misa at 45.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I think like Luke Misa for me is the best OHL player outside of Liam Greentree, and Zane Parekh, of course, but the best OHL forward basically.
Okay.
Outside of Liam Greentree, for me, it's Luke Misa. The pace on this kid is ridiculous. He can outpace NHLers already. Like I'm fairly confident and comfortable with that. He's growing defensively and has actually made it a net positive in his play. Really good at understanding where to position himself, and he's not all speed. Like you see players with this speed just kind of bulldoze their way around the ice, not really knowing how to utilize their speed, utilize speed differentials, when to slow down. Speed is a tool that you can kind of mold and modify like Play-Doh to kind of make your way around the ice and do some good things. And usually with players that are this fast, they're just outpacing everyone. But Luke Misa is really good at slowing down, at knowing when to kind of take his foot off the gas a bit and let the play develop before speeding up again. So it's just beyond the pace. He's just a really good playmaker. And there's so many different areas of his game that can hit. And I'm like, what is going on? Right? Like, it doesn't make sense. But we have to go rapid fire on these. We still have a lot more to go through. Lane Hudson. Wow. Cole Hudson, Lane Hudson's brother, at 57th overall in these rankings. And honestly, I understand the free fall. Maybe not that much. But he has been not really too impressive, not even offensively, for the NTDP. And yeah, I mean, he's one spot above Will Skahan, which I can get on board with. I like him definitely more than Will Skahan. I just think both of them could possibly be higher in these rankings. But and then we have Clarke Caswell at 68. Clarke Caswell has really, really impressed me. Luke Sweeney was the first to kind of point him out to me, and every time I've watched him, I've just come out surprised with how good a player this undersized can be defensively. Like, he's really, really good off the puck. He's playing on their PK. He's playing, top minutes in their program as well. And overall, you just see him get to the right spots consistently, get a stick in the right lanes consistently. But on top of that, he's a really good handler. He's a really good playmaker, and he uses that offensive brain really well. So that's the mold of player I like. Players that are really intelligent and use it well and have tools that can be uplifted by that intelligence. So seeing him at 68th overall is a shocker to me. But take it away with the European side here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's start off with a biggie, which is Emil Hemming at number 5, which is one of the rankings that in these lists that I just don't understand. Like, I just don't really get it. He has a really good shot, and I think that there's definitely still an argument to be made around Emil Hemming as a first-round talent. But that conversation to me is more limited, like 25 to 32 range, if anything, because he's still really limited beyond the goal scorer. He can move off puck decently well. He can find soft ice decently well at the junior level, especially on the European ice surface, which he struggled with a lot more even in the World Juniors, where he still had the European ice surface but was playing against better competition. Finding soft ice was a struggle for him. With the puck on his stick, he was struggling to really create advantages or put it into better places than where he got it. And if we're talking top 5 European prospects of a draft class, that's not really what I'm looking for. Leon Mugli at 13 is another one. Like, I've watched a bit of him. I have to watch a bit more before I make any bigger statements around him. But I have still a lot of questions about how he projects. I think he's the type of player that could be a long-term high-end player in Europe. I think that is entirely within the realm of possibility. He is quite intelligent. He has some decent foundational habits that allow coaches to trust him a decent amount at a young age, just by being an undersized defenseman. But the actual toolkit that could make him a high-end or impactful NHLer is definitely still a bit more abstract in my eyes. Nikita Artyom at 14 just makes me a little bit annoyed because he is an incredibly versatile and skilled and defensively capable forward. He is exactly what you want in a skilled player playing professional hockey as an 18-year-old that's draft eligible in the KHL. and he's doing it really, really well. Like, he's playing some high-end defensive hockey. It has a super high motor. With the puck on his stick, he always makes decisions that are calculated, and sometimes they're wrong. But when he makes a wrong decision, it is because he got there in a calculated string of decision making or was pressured into it, and he learns from those mistakes. He actively applies what he learns from mistakes into his game, which is what you want to see in young players playing professional hockey. Perhaps the most confusing one of the entire list is Alexander Zetterberg at 18.
I
5'7" winger who plays like he's 5'2", and this is coming from, like, I mean,
we're the champions of undersized players. Like, we're the champions of undersized. I do not see Alexander Zetterberg ever really making the NHL, and if he does, great for him.
Please, I'd love to be wrong, but
there's not a single compensatory habit in his game. Like, not a single one that helps him overcome his lack of size. And it's
and we've wanted to see it with Zetterberg. We've been like curiously watching his games since like July. Like, he was a player that we had a little star next to his name of, like, great name, of course, but the skill, the flashes of like U18 performances,
the playmaking.
But as soon as he's hit the U20 level, it has been a lot more difficult. So 18 is very high, especially when it's like 5 slots ahead. One of the most underrated two-way and especially offensive defensemen in this draft class, and Alphonse Frey. Probably my favorite Swede of the draft class so far. Alphonse Frey is a super mobile, very intelligent, and quite creative left shot defenseman who can really, really take the game by the horns and make it his own. He loves to take control of the game, especially in the breakout, both as a carrier and a passer. In the offensive zone, he distributes the puck really, really well, gets it to dangerous areas, repositions himself into open ice to surface an outlet when his teammates get pressured. Really, really smart, and is outthinking all of his teammates, which is making it a little bit more difficult for him to actually create with these incursions, because they're often like he's thinking about lanes that his teammates just can't really see, because he's moving at a pace that's just a lot higher than what the J20 often is at. But he's a player that I think is really underrated at 23 among European prospects. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up for the European side of things. But definitely multiple players that the rankings give me a lot of questions, but I'm curious to dig in more with all of them to kind of see where the upside or optimism is kind of coming from here with NHL Central Scouting.
100% fully agree. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next episode as we do an NCAA roundup. This has been Hattie Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.